lot of places it never really was useful. Structuralist way of looking at this is with phonemes. What a phoneme is an actual letter that exists in your head, basically. So if you have the T phoneme, then that contains within it the possible muscle actions for T or T. And there's some rule that's internal to that letter that kind of picks which one you make. The reason that collapsed is pretty quickly is it doesn't work if you have minimal pairs. For example, you'll get problems like cats and dogs. The S at the end, for one, is realized as S, cats. The other one, it's dogs. Dogs, it's a Z. If you try to pronounce it the other way, cats and dogs, it sounds really weird. So there's a very clear difference there. But also, you can't really just say that it's just one sound in your head that gets automatically divvied up one way or another, just because this is hard to explain. It would cause lots of crazy things to happen. More importantly, it would make it so that every time you heard a Z sound, it would turn back into an S, and therefore you could not distinguish SIP and ZIP. So neatly sorting these into blocks doesn't really work. The Chomskyan look, which is also kind of dying out, but in favor of a more like diffuse cloud of ideas, is that you have a pronunciation in your head that corresponds pretty closely to an actual sound pronunciation. That's far more detailed than just the spelling. It just goes through a lot of filters and transforms before it comes out of your mouth. And so you do have specifically a S or a Z. It just, there's something in the way that blocks you from saying cats, or from cats. That ties into phonology theory, which I might mention later if I have time. All right, let's look at an example of one of the weirder transforms that goes on in English. This is actually comically complicated. I think Goldsmith spent 3 hours trying to explain this one rule. I will try to boil down one interesting part of it. But flapping. So this is something that occurs only in American English. It's one of the most distinctive accent features of American English, and it's really hard to replicate if you don't speak American English. It's this guy. It's the T sound in butter. If you try to like reproduce it, it's not quite a D, but it's really close. It's butter, butter. What it is you make a D sound while really rapidly flinging your tongue against the position where the D would be, and then down. And so it's a flying D. It doesn't have that much in common with the T, but it only appears in English in the same phoneme as a T. It can only be where a T is supposed to be. Yeah, and so in no other major language does this sound even occur. There are a handful of small African languages where like it exists as its own thing, independent of the D or T. When it occurs is really, really elaborately specified. It's influenced by whether it's a beginning, middle, or end of a word, whether it's in a stressed or unstressed syllable, whether it's next to a nasal or next to a liquid or next to a glide. Like all of these things have fairly elaborate patterns, and you can make like this 9-dimensional chart of where you can flap and where you can't. And also, is that it pretty neatly divides up between the ones that are mandatory. Let's see. Italian is a mandatory aspirated T. You can't really say Italian or Italian. It's really weird, even though it's the same sounds in there. The mandatory flaps, like Italy. If you say Italy, that's still correct English, but it sounds like English with a different accent. It doesn't sound American. Italy. And then there are the ones that are in free variation. And free variation just means that there is no observable conditioning factor. Often the same person repeating the same sentence to themselves over and over will switch between pronouncing one or the other. Sanity is a pretty simple one. Sanity, 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 sanity. You can hear the difference pretty easily. At the same time, it's just there's no meaningful difference there. Like it doesn't encode anything about accent or anything like that. The only place where you can kind of see clearly what's going on is Beethoven, Italy. is in a inside a word in between two normal vowels. If the first vowel is stressed, the second vowel is not stressed, as in Beethoven, I believe. You get that little H there means it's aspirated. Italy. If the first vowel is stressed, no. Beethoven. Stress can be defined a lot of ways. Things are not just stressed or unstressed. Things are stressed or secondarily stressed or unstressed. The O in Beethoven is not a schwa, so it is actually stressed. So. If you really have an unstressed syllable, Italy. It goes to a flap. If the first one is a schwa and then it's stressed, so B1 minus, you get something like Italian. Italian, that's a mandatory aspirated T. And then if neither of them are stressed, you get something like there are also things that make this problematic, such as water. Water is always flat. You can't actually put it in this chart, though. Or wait, no, you can. You can. This is an example of something completely different that I actually cut out of the talk, but now that I've said it, I'm going to say why it's interesting. Which is that syllables are bullshit. There's no such thing as a syllable. The people have said you can chop up syllables by things that have vowels in the middle and then consonants at the edge or syllables. This becomes completely meaningless because what if you have two different vowels next to each other? Or what if you have vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant? Where do you draw the lines? You can't. And there's no meaningful or useful way to do it. There are things that can kind of tug something towards one side or towards another, which will influence like when you pause in the middle of a word if you need to. But water, those forces line up very, very neatly, so the T is in both syllables of the word perfectly evenly. Okay, that's sort of a very, very brief intro to phonology and what phonology looks at. One of the big things, which is one of the more tedious parts of it, is it's all these rule transforms. They have to go in order. Figuring out what order they go in is just like this big SAT logic puzzle that goes on forever. And like Chomsky, who was basically wrong about everything but defined all the terms for everything, wrote a book in the late 50s called Chomsky and Halley wrote a book in the late 50s called Sound Patterns of English, which is just one giant chart. It's like 120 pages of every rule that defines any major American English accent, and I think probably RP as well, but like high class London accent. So there's a lot to do there beyond the sort of simple stuff and flapping, which is just weird as hell. It's not very fun. Okay, there's two more things I brought. It's very, very brief, absurdly brief history of all this stuff, and also my final paper, which was a study of Stacy's accent. I think I'll start with that. It's probably more amusing. So I'll just go through the process I used. So you probably Miss H's vowel realization and pronunciation of phonemic R's is in line with general American accent. However, she pronounces a few words that are conspicuous and hard to localize. This guy. Dyslexic. No, not upside down here. Yeah. But it's an upside down here.
Draw a circle with lines, but then erase one of the instruments.
Yeah.
I forget where they are.